Hello, everyone, and welcome to Seafood Matters. Thank you for joining us again. My guest today is Colin Faulkner, the new Chief Executive of Seafish. Hello, Colin, and welcome to Seafood Matters.
Hi, Jim. Thanks for having me on. Delighted to be here.
Thank you. Great. I'd just like to start just to say, we've had a wee chat about the Seafish, but I have a lengthy relationship with Seafish going back decades. I've been involved in various projects. I've arranged delegations to the Faroe Islands back in the 80s and 90s. I did a lot of business out there, and we'd put groups over there. Around the millennium, we renovated an old historic building up here and turned it into a seafood restaurant.
Yeah.
We opened in 2002.
Good.
In 2006, we were down at a function in London, and award ceremony was at Seafish. And
yes.
I was nominated the UK Seafood Chef of the Year.
Oh, fantastic. Well done.
And the following year, we were back down, and the restaurant got the Seafood Restaurant of the Year. So
well done indeed.
I'm delighted to chat to you today, Colin. I have a close relationship with Seafish.
Well, I'm delighted to hear you were successful, Jim.
Thank you. Colin, for our listeners who may not know your background, can you tell us about your career journey and what attracted you to the Chief Executive role at Seafish?
Sure. No, I'm very happy to. Look, so I've been with Seafish since January this year. And then before that, I worked, I suppose most of my career is really as a kind of career civil servant, I suppose, most of it, but not all of it. So before this job, I worked in DEFRA in the UK government in London here, where I'm based. And I was head of international fisheries and seafood trade for DEFRA for, over 7 years in the end, through the Brexit periods and through the whole period of kind of getting ourselves established as an independent coastal state in the UK, and which was just the most incredible experience and privilege to have, really. But before that, then, so I 2015 to 2018, I worked for the Green Investment Bank, and then they were bought over by a company, Australian company called Macquarie, who have lots of Scottish links as well, actually. Worked for GIB and Macquarie for about 3.5 years as head of government affairs for them. And before that, I worked in Scottish Government, Cabinet Office, Scotland Office, in the UK Government. So worked kind of in a whole variety of roles across Scottish Government and the UK Government for a very long time. Despite the fact that a lot of my roles in my career have involved Scotland, I'm not Scottish. I grew up in Northern Ireland. I'm very proud to have done so. But for, I don't know, perhaps by accident rather than by design, a huge number of roles I've done have involved contact with Scotland. I've lived there for a good 15, 16 years of my life before I moved to London. So, so a kind of career civil servant, but delighted to be at Seafish now. And, I was really keen to join Seafish. I wanted to stay around in the seafood sector. It's a fascinating sector to work in, as you know, Jim. Really interesting sector. Seafish has got a great history to it, not least giving awards to all sorts of deserving people like yourself. But Seafish has got a great history. It it does a lot of good, and it does a lot of good in all sorts of parts of the UK. And I wanted to be part of that. So I've been here since January and really enjoying it.
It's great. I certainly support Seafish. I think it's a great organisation. And having spent 6 months or so you've been in the position?
Yeah.
Has anything surprised you about the UK seafood industry since you've seen it closer at hand?
So what surprised me about it? Look, I think, I've been involved in fisheries and the seafood industry for a long time in the UK, so I've spent about 10 years of my time in government working in fisheries over different roles. So I do know the sector reasonably well. But I suppose what surprises me is always the kind of the infinite variety of what happens within the sector, and and the infinite variety of activities around the UK. The seafood industry and the seafood industries, plural, look very different, obviously, in the southwest of England from how they look in Humberside, from how they look in Kilkeel, and from how they look in Scrabster. So, and it's one of the things that I really enjoy is the kind of infinite variety of the seafood sectors, but also then the incredible adaptability of the sectors to across the supply chain to all sorts of change. And I'm maybe surprised isn't the right way of putting it, but it's I'm always in awe of the way that the sector is able to adapt to whatever latest difficulty or challenge falls in front of them. When I joined Seafish in January, no one was talking about fuel prices in January, yet and that's been a really, all things Middle East and Iran have been, a really big challenge for the sector in the last few months, obviously. But it's amazing watching how versatile and adaptable the sectors are when it comes to adapting to those really big existential challenges. So maybe it's a bit more in awe of rather than surprised by, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. And did you arrive at Seafish with priorities?
So, well, yes. I suppose my priority is making sure that Seafish can make the maximum contribution it can to the health of the seafood industries across the UK. I suppose that's been my priority from day one, and will continue to be the priority. Breaking that down, then my priority is to run an organization that people enjoy working for and find a fulfilling place to work in their own careers. To run an organization that people feel attached to when they're working in it, that they feel they're getting career satisfaction out of their day-to-day life when they're working in it. And then on top of that, to run an organization, as I say, that actually does have impact on the ground, and makes the seafood industries across the UK a better place to be, and also an organisation that understands that infinite variety of businesses that are involved in the supply chain, from whether it's potters and creelers and whatever else in the catch, and then in the broader catching sector, right through to the food service sector. It's kind of an infinite variety of businesses. So making sure that Seafish is really responsive to the needs of the sector. I have to stop calling it the sector, because that implies that it's all just one big monolith and that all businesses are exactly the same. So the priority for me is being really clear that this is an incredibly complex and infinitely interesting set of businesses who work right across the supply chain.
But they all need each other.
They do, exactly. There's there's that awful phrase ecosystem that we use, a business ecosystem out there. It's a bit of a cliche, but it is like that business ecosystem does resemble the kind of a natural ecosystem where of codependence, and we won't have a thriving. You can't have a thriving processing sector in the UK without a thriving retail sector and a thriving food service sector and a thriving catching sector. They're all mutually dependent.
Yeah,
it's a fascinating sector to see.
Have you discovered any misconceptions about Seafish since taking on the role?
About Seafish? Misconceptions? Well, look, Seafish always has occupies a tricky position, because ultimately we are funded by a levy from a whole variety of organisations. No one likes paying tax in life. I don't like paying it. Most people don't like paying tax. So I can understand why there's sometimes a view that a business pays a levy, but they don't get as much back in return for it as they would like. I can completely get that. And I think, coming back to priorities, one of my priorities is to, for as long as I'm in this role, is to make sure that we are telling our story really, really coherently, telling our story really cogently, so that our levy payers and the wider sector really do understand why and understand the ways in which they're getting value for money from the organisation. And as I say, no one likes paying tax, but you need to be able to understand what you're getting back in return for it. So it's our job in the organisation to help dispel those myths or dispel those misconceptions, and to help our levy payers in the wider sector understand and see how we're delivering impact. And that's, that responsibility is on us to bring that out and to make that coherent.
Okay. Yeah. And have you learned much from fishermen, processors, merchants, and people and retailers and other stakeholders since around the UK?
Every day of the week, to be honest, Jim. Yeah. So, like, thinking out loud, I was down in Cornwall for a couple of days last week. And, one of the most fun things to do, and one of the most fun things to do in my job is that I get the opportunity to be out and about, the length and breadth of the UK, really, really often. And, it's fascinating, even just spending an hour doing, a walk around Mevagissey Harbour, on the harbour wall, just talking to people about their business, about how the fishery is changing. Again, it's not that long ago that no one talked about octopus, and if you're in Mevagissey, it's all anyone wants to talk about. But perfectly reasonably. Because of the kind of change that's bringing. So, look, one of the things I love in this job is the opportunity to be out and about, learning from either the catching sector, if I'm in Mevagissey or Newlyn or Scalloway or Kilkeel or wherever else, but also then I'm in Grimsby on Monday, actually, and understanding the frozen at sea sector is probably a sector I'm not as well up to speed on, and really looking forward to meeting them on Monday, because I know I will learn so much about that sector of the economy from them in Grimsby. It's one of the real lucky things. I do find myself very lucky that I get to get out and about, as you say, the length and breadth of the country, and meet fascinating, passionate people. Are just really passionate about their jobs. That's what makes it, as I say, infinitely interesting to me.
And with the change in what Seafish has gone through, how would you describe the organisation you've inherited?
Look, I think it's actually, I honestly think it's in good shape. Let's be honest. It is in good shape. Yes, of course, it's a smaller organisation than what many people maybe remember back, in the 1980s, 1990s, and so on. Yeah, of course, it's a smaller organisation. That's why we have to spend our money wisely. We have to focus our activities really carefully. We can't do everything. We have neither the funds nor the expertise to do everything anyway. So what I want to do is make sure that we're focusing our efforts on where we can get the biggest bang for our buck. But look, I think the organisation is in good shape. It's got real deep wells of expertise in the organisation. And as ever, as I say, I keep using the P word for passion, but with really passionate people who enjoy working in the sector, have worked in it in many cases all their lives. I was talking to someone this morning who's been with Seafish, I think she said 43 years. So it's an organisation that people feel very attached to, that people really enjoy working for, and that's a great sign.
And would you be happy to reassure industry stakeholders about Seafish's future direction?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's got a really strong contribution to make to whether it's the processing sector, the catching sector, the retailing, the food service sector. And when you look at the types of activities that we do, we're I suppose the most common activity that, say, skippers would see would be our work on safety, safety. We know it's a dangerous industry, and we carry on doing really, really important work in the safety and then the training sphere. In right across the training in the food service sector, helping the industry navigate all the really existential problems that exist at the moment around labour supply and around getting the right skills. Then we get into trade promotion, export promotion, helping businesses navigate their way through really, really tricky regulatory, a really tricky regulatory landscape at the moment. Look, there's a long list, and I don't want to. But Seafish has got a really important role to play. Obviously, we need to adapt that role to what industry are telling us. We need to adapt that role to what industry wants us to be doing, until we can add the maximum impact. But yeah, I think unless you've heard otherwise, Jim, I'm very happy with the future of Seafish. But I don't know. Maybe I've missed something.
I am. I would absolutely. One of the things, if I was asked that question, which in a roundabout way you've maybe asked me, the first thing I would say, Colin, would be Seafish have respect in the industry. I know that. They're respected.
Good.
And trusted. I know
Good.
that from different sectors.
Well, I'm delighted to hear that. As I say, before I joined Seafish and when I was working in DEFRA, I worked a bit with Seafish during that time, and it was again one of the reasons why I wanted to join the organisation. You could see that the organisation had real strengths. Had such expertise within it. Really deep wells of expertise, deep attachment to the sector as well. A real strong desire for the sector to thrive. Not just as an organisation, but the individuals within it had that real attachment and desire to see the industry thrive. Delighted to hear what you say.
Yeah, and would you feel, since you've joined, there's any parts that you find are successful and you should strengthen? You feel you'd like to strengthen?
Yeah. So, I suppose that one thing I would highlight is, Seafish is always, I suppose in many ways, well known for the kind of analytical work that it does. Around trade data, around economic analysis. It's carried out the fleet survey and processing survey every year for many years now. But I would really, really want Seafish to be a kind of go-to organisation for anyone wanting to understand the seafood sector. From an analytical point of view and from a data point of view. I think Seafish has a really strong offer on that front already, but it's something that I certainly want to see us doing more of and really helping tell the story about seafood based on really strong data, based on really strong analysis. So that's one area. I think there's also a huge amount we can do, and where we will need to do more on kind of let's loosely call it kind of navigating all the difficult regulatory landscape that businesses face in the seafood world. We know there's a lot going on the UK-EU trading relationship. We're expecting a new kind of settlement with the EU in, well, not quite sure when, depending on what happens with changes of prime ministers and so on. But we in Seafish, as and when that new trading arrangement is reached, we will need to make sure that we are resourced properly to help our levy payers and the industry more broadly to take the benefit of any of those changes to trading relationship with the EU. So, again, another area where we need to be at the top of our game, and where I want to see us doing much more. So, that's just two areas where I think there's a lot more opportunity for us to do work. But I think, just coming back to the point about listening to what industry wants, we know as well that there are really big existential challenges out there for the sector. Spatial squeeze, as we know, is literally existential for some businesses. Labor supply and skills shortages and so on. So likewise, and to me, those are two areas where I really want Seafish to be playing its part in finding solutions. On spatial squeeze, we've got huge amounts of data as an organisation, which is incredibly helpful to POs and others make their case when it comes to fighting their corner on spatial squeeze issues. We need to work really closely with, as you say, POs and all sorts of representative bodies to help them make their case in the issues around spatial squeeze. Similarly, on skills and labour, that again is existential for many in the sector. So there's a lot of work where we can a lot of topics where we can genuinely add value.
Yeah, very good. And the new annual plan focuses on various priorities. Why were they chosen and given priorities?
Yeah, so I suppose it's a combination of factors, Jim. I suppose the two main factors are, do we have expertise in those issues, and are they are those issues important to the sectors? And it's really a combination of those two issues. So the annual plan talks about us focusing on kind of three main areas of work, or three outcomes that we want to help bring about. Kind of a safe and skilled workforce, freer trade in and out of the country and seafood, and more resilient supply chain. That's in many ways our USP as an organisation. It's where we have expertise already, but we want to bring sharper focus to our outcomes and to our priorities. So it's a combination of, are these issues that matter to the to our levy payers, and are they issues where we have expertise and where we can add value?
And how did the Seafish arrive at these priorities, or were the industry consulted?
Yes. So it's a bit of both. A little bit of what is our offer, and what are we able to do, and then kind of combining that with feedback from industry. So certainly since I've joined in January, we've been talking a lot to industry about the issues they want us to focus on. You might know that we've got various mechanisms internally for doing that. We've got what we call sector panels. We've got advisory committees around the UK. We've been talking to them and kind of road testing these types of priorities. So we haven't carried out a kind of formal consultation in the sense that a government, we're not government, so we haven't carried out a formal consultation in that sense, but we've done a lot of listening to our colleagues in, as I say, through sector panels, through advisory committees and other conversations, to help us make sure that we're setting things out in a way that is understandable, is coherent, and going to actually have some impact.
And would you think the average fisherman, processors, anybody in the seafood business will notice a difference?
Look, I suspect most fishermen just want to get on with fishing, I suppose, and they're probably not too interested in bureaucratic bodies. But look, I hope they will. What will they notice? One of the things that we are, I think, really strong in is that offer on safety, on training courses, as I say, to help make the industry a safer place. So I really hope that an average fisherman, obviously no fishermen are average, obviously, they're all excellent, but any fisherman, I really hope will see the benefit that Seafish can bring through our offer on the safety front. Processing sector, we work really closely with the processing sector in all its guises on be it regulations. I know there's a huge issue at the moment around packaging regulations and extended producer responsibility and so on. Huge issues around energy costs that they obviously face, around the regulatory environment for imports and exports. And to name but three, those are all areas where we work with processors and where we can add value, and all be more than the sum of our parts. So look, I hope that they will see a kind of sharper focus, but time will tell, and I look forward to hearing from them if they are or if they're not.
Yeah, indeed. And how serious a problem does Seafish see things like recruitment?
Sorry, Jim, say that again. I missed that question.
Sorry. I'm just asking how Seafish view what their perspective is on problems like recruitment.
Yeah.
And
look,
its challenges.
Obviously, it's recruitment into the sector and either getting people through the door in the first place or then keeping them once they've come through the door is a huge challenge. And, it looks very different according to which bit of the supply chain you're in. Look, I think there's a variety of ways in which we can help. So we, for example, do a lot of work with governments to help them understand the implications of their skills policies, to help them understand the implications of immigration policy changes in the UK, which have had really significant impact on the on particularly recruitment of overseas labour. So we can help governments understand the impact of what they're doing and make sure that they've got the right evidence in front of them when they're making decisions. We can help businesses as well. Now, there are many businesses that do a very good job on this front and don't need much help from us. But there are also others where we can help them access either the labour supply they need or help them skill up their workforce to be able to adapt those staff to different challenges within their companies. But at the same time, I think it's really important to remember that I see a lot of examples of really forward-thinking companies who are who have invested in their crew and invested in their staff year after year after year, and who actually are doing a really good job at either recruiting staff or maintaining the crew or the staff that they have. And obviously that's not an easy thing to do, but there are incredible examples out there of where that works. Mm-hmm. Similarly, if you go to Shetland, always a great place to visit. Primarily locally based crew in Shetland. A reasonable throughput of new entrants coming in. So it's not all it's a nuanced picture across the UK and across the sectors.
Yeah, no, the Shetland is a good example of that. No
it's
question.
A very fine place indeed. So
absolutely, totally, yeah. And is there any part of it helping attract younger people?
Well, indeed, yes. Look. I often think that if you're, 16, 17, what more exciting sector could you join than the fishing sector, and that the kind of the autonomy you have over your life without, sitting in front of a desk all day, sitting in front of a laptop at a desk all day, the kind of thing I do all day, it's far more interesting and far more exciting and fun to be out on a fishing boat many days of the year. Maybe not every day of the year. It's not a walk in the park every day, but what a fantastic career to take on. What a challenge to take on. So look, I'm completely in awe of anyone who joins the fishing industry, and I'm always in awe of the amount of passion that they show for the sector. So I could only encourage anyone to see that there are all sorts of careers across the seafood sector, whether it's catching, whether it's processing, whether it's in the service sector. There are an infinite number of careers out there. If you go to Grimsby and you see some of the seafood processors, when you see some of the factories there, it's advanced manufacturing and it's advanced engineering you're talking about. So that's a very different proposition from from the catching sector. So there is an incredible variety of careers out there for any young person who wants to join the seafood sector.
Yeah, and from the safety side, it's improved over the years, but
thankfully, yes,
fatalities and serious accidents still occur.
Indeed. Yeah, alas, they do. One of the campaigns that we run every year, the Home and Dry campaign, it's an incredibly important, what better objective could you have for any campaign than to bring fishermen home and dry, really? And we've working with all sorts of organisations, whether it's the MCA or the accident investigation branch and so on. There's a huge amount of really good cross-sector working with industry, and no one wants the industry to be safer more than the industry itself, frankly, from what I can see. Seafish has played a really important role in that for a very long time. We've done that with the oil and gas sector, actually, helping the fishing sector kind of avoid, for want of a better word, avoid oil and gas pipelines and installations and so on. We've been doing that for the best part of 40 years with the Kingfisher program, and that Kingfisher program's had really, really important, significant, positive outcomes and positive benefits over the years. So, look, lots more we can do on that front, but it's core and central to what we do in Seafish.
I could dig into that, the Kingfisher charts, going back to Ken, but oh my goodness, that's showing my age.
Yes, it's amazing. There's actually a wonderful kind of library of them in our Grimsby office, and it's fascinating to see how the documents have changed over time. From the ones in late 70s, early 80s, all typed out by hand, posted out every fortnight, and now today I still get these things. I now get updates on my phone come through. The Kingfisher app, I think, is fantastic. There are updates on my phone come through about various things, but it's fascinating seeing how that's evolved over the years. And as I say, that type of work is absolutely core and central to what we do in Seafish. We probably need to shout about it a bit more, I think. I'm not sure that it's always as well understood by our partners as it could be. So, I'm keen that we shout about it a bit more and tell our story, but it's a good story to tell.
Oh, it is. And the passion there was at the time with Ken and people like that to it. He could map up the West Coast right, just in his hand.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, what just going back to that spatial squeeze, one of the really interesting things on the Kingfisher project, it's effectively 40 plus years of really fantastic data about fishing patterns across UK waters. And although that data was gathered for different purposes, it's incredibly useful to help industry map out, its activity in the context of spatial squeeze. And in many ways, it's a gold mine of information for Crown Estates and Crown Estate Scotland. It's a gold mine of information for the fishing industry and for offshore wind developers. And as I say, that data was gathered for a slightly different purpose, but it's a real gold mine. And we're working pretty closely with a number of POs to help them make their case to developers and to the Crown Estate when it comes to making sure that fishermen have space to fish.
Yeah, in the annual plan talks about smoother and expanding seafood trade. What do you feel that would mean in practical terms?
So, in practical terms, it means helping businesses, overcome, those kind of regulatory hurdles and barriers that just appear in life, for all sorts of good reasons. But if you're new to exporting, then we can help with market development. We can help with market understanding of whichever market you're wanting to export to. Helping you understand what's the paperwork that you need to fill in, and how does that work in China compared with how it works in Italy and in the EU. So it can be everything from just everything from explaining the regulatory landscape and helping businesses navigate their way through it, to them helping them export to different markets. We've for a number of years we've been very heavily involved in exports promotion work. Whether it's the Barcelona Seafood Show, the kind of Global Expo at Barcelona. We run the UK pavilion at that. Similarly, kind of the China shows and the Japan show each summer. And we will be doing a lot more on that front as well. So there's a whole variety of activities around just helping businesses get seafood in and out of the country to make more money from tapping into other markets, as well as selling in the UK.
And do you feel they're competitive in the global markets?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great product. It's in it's in huge demand. Just thinking, back to octopus, just because that's quite a thing these days. It's a great product that's in huge demand in Spain and Italy at the moment. Thinking again of Shetland, the whitefish that's caught in Shetland waters, again huge demand in Europe. Shellfish similarly, in huge demand all around the world. Mackerel, for example, again, just thinking about the demand in the Far East. We've got a great product. People want to buy it, and so they should. It's a really healthy product. What more could you want than a high protein, low carbon, healthy product nowadays? And we've got it in abundance in our waters, whether it's shellfish, whether it's farmed, whether it's finfish or whatever else. We've got a great product.
And when you say that, I know it. My days it used to, and it would be interesting. And Nick, is it still classed as a quality product, UK?
I think it certainly is. And when you see the quality of the produce that's landed in, I don't know, it's in Lerwick in May, and you see the the quality of the produce being landed in Lerwick, or I'm contractually obliged, Jim, to mention Northern Ireland at all times, given my background. But when I was in Kilkeel earlier in the year, you see the quality of the nephrops being landed there. Of course, it's a really high quality, really high quality produce, and I think it's pretty high demand around the world.
Is there a role for Seafish in helping maybe smaller seafood businesses access those markets?
Yeah, I think there is actually, and yeah, you make a good point, Jim, because it's sometimes easy to kind of just focus on the bigger businesses when actually it's the SMEs that we need to that maybe don't export traditionally and maybe struggle to tap into the export market. But perhaps that's where we can add most value, and certainly the there's a program of work kicking off at the moment that we're taking forward with DEFRA on seafood exports. The minister announced it in at the Barcelona Seafood Show in April. So there's a program of work that we're taking forward with DEFRA, and it will need one of its focuses will be how do we make sure that it's the smaller businesses who get access to, how do we help them? How do we skill them up? How do we support them to get to the point where they can stand on their own 2 feet in the export world?
Yeah.
And then perhaps when they're on their own 2 feet, they need a little bit less support or support of a different kind, maybe. But no, you make a really good point that sometimes it's the SMEs that need. Well, again, and I should be clear, we work really closely with the likes of Seafood Scotland, and Salmon Scotland as well. But we work really closely with the team that with Donna's team on export promotion work. And they do I think they do a fantastic job as well. And we work together very well. And there's a lot that we can all do to help our SMEs and our larger companies tap into those export markets.
And do you feel in that market, when we're mentioning them, the challenges from things like Brexit, inflation, labour shortages, and that, do you feel there's still a resilience today?
Yeah, definitely. Oh, yes. Look, of course, there's resilience there. That's not to downplay any of the challenges that you just mentioned there, Jim. They've all been difficult, and fuel prices, for example, in the last few months have caused huge problems, not just in the UK but globally, really. But yeah, there is a resilience there, and some of that comes down to the kind of the passion that people have for the sector. They will be damned. They will, before they give up, and there's that passion means that that gives people real drive to make it work.
And are you concerned about the impact of maybe increasing costs on seafood businesses?
Yeah, look, I think that's a concern for any business. When costs are going up, that's always going to have an impact on the P&L and on the bottom line. So, look, but I come back to the point that there's a really quality product there. There's a strong demand for it, and if you've got a quality product with strong demand, that's a pretty good starting point for any business. And yes, there are really significant problems for businesses, particularly around energy costs at the moment. Just employment costs as well are going up, as we know. So real challenges there. But we've got a lot of really innovative businesses in the UK seafood sector who are able to adapt to those changes, adapt to those challenges, and all power to them.
Yeah, no, it's interesting to see how I would be encouraged to hear you are thinking positive of it, because if I go back to my experience, I would have to say, Colin, when I had my factory running and we were selling real top quality.
Yeah.
When I say top quality, most of the boats in our area at that time were 3 days was a long trip.
Yeah.
Most of them were daily. So we were buying that fish, almost daily boats, processing it. And we got to the stage where dealing with like frozen food wholesalers and people like that, or the inland fish markets. I felt latterly they would buy ours first, but they wouldn't pay any more for it.
Yeah, look, no, I get that completely, and it's easy for me as a kind of faceless bureaucrat in a nice office to kind of say, oh, it's all going smoothly and all going perfectly for businesses. It's tough to run businesses. It's tough to make money. It's tough to compete. But look, all I can say is I see a lot of really good examples around the country of people thriving. Yes, there are plenty of examples of people finding it really tough as well. Of course there are. But there's a real. I'm always heartened by the fact that I think there's a real quality produce put forward in the UK that's in demand globally. Perhaps it would be a shame. It's a bit of a shame that we don't eat as much of it ourselves as we should, and we export so much of it. But that's an entirely different story, or an entirely different issue. But yeah, look, I completely get that it's tough, but there are a lot of people who are very good at rising to that challenge.
And where would you see the biggest challenges and risks facing the supply chain over the next few years?
Well, gosh, like it well, where shall I start? So, look, there's clearly quite a lot going on kind of just, let's loosely call it kind of a global supply of seafood. Particularly in whitefish. There's a real contraction in supply globally at the moment, particularly on the for a whole variety of reasons. You've got declining quotas in North Norway, or kind of in the Barents Sea, and a little bit in Iceland as well. You see, much less Russian whitefish in the supply chain, and quite right too, in my view. So you also see then. There's a big bucket of issues around just that kind of global contraction in supply, particularly on whitefish, but not solely. And look, you then also see a whole bucket of issues around the impacts of climate change, the impacts of changing stock distribution around the world. Which, and I'm not even sure we've really grasped the full extent and the full details of what that will mean for businesses in the coming decades. That in itself, I think, will be an enormous challenge for businesses to adapt to. Where supply chains will just have to evolve really significantly. So look, there's a whole bucket of things around what I would just loosely call global supply, and where the fish are in the ocean. Look, other challenges. Seafood is I said earlier, really high protein, low carbon product, but when money's short, consumers often tend to switch to cheaper proteins. And that's a pretty common occurrence globally. So seafood can be is often seen as an expensive product. So that protein battle globally, it will remain difficult. But look, there's massive opportunities out there at the same time. I always think back to what the Food and Agriculture Organization talks about, where they say that. And I'm probably going to misquote the numbers here, so forgive me for misquoting the numbers, but there'll be I think it's 2 billion extra people on the planet by 2050. If global population rises from 8 billion to 10 billion, how will that extra 2 billion be fed? Well, they're in terms of protein sources, probably seafood. It's probably farmed. A lot of it farmed, but seafood has got a real future in terms of being that go-to high protein food source for billions of people around the world. And in an environment where we're trying to reduce climate emissions, seafood, as a very broad brush statement, seafood is really well placed to fill that nutrition gap around the world. High protein food source with comparatively low carbon emissions compared with beef, compared with whatever else, and my shellfish colleagues would expect me to mention the likes of mussels and so on, which have an incredibly low carbon footprint,
Yeah.
astonishingly low.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we almost need to market ourselves more as a product, as a protein product, and as a low carbon product, as much as anything else, because to me that's where the battle will be fought in the next 20, 30 years.
It's interesting when you say that, because, and you're talking about the demand and price increase, and the prices quayside prices have been really high this
Yeah, indeed.
last few weeks anyway.
Yep.
And there's, as the saying goes, Colin, there's all kinds to make a world.
Exactly.
You'll get some fishermen rubbing their hands, enjoying the big price. You get some other more realistic ones that are a wee bit worried, where's this going to go? Where's this going to take us?
Yeah.
And it reminds me very much of a conversation I had with a customer. It's actually Glasgow, and we were in a similar situation. Price is high, and I don't think we have to be too over alarmed, because fishing is cyclical.
Yeah.
Things, there's highs, peaks and troughs, highs and lows. And I was having a conversation with this customer in Glasgow, and it was at a time when prices were high then. Obviously not in the same monetary values as we're talking now, but
Yeah.
high at the time. And his comment to me was, yes, some people will enjoy it, but we have to be careful that we don't kill the goose that lays the golden egg.
Completely.
And when you think of what we're going through just now, do you know when that conversation took place, Colin? That was in the 60s.
Right. Wow.
So, as the saying goes, for all the changes, nothing changes.
Well, indeed. Indeed, and it is. I suppose, at the risk of going too Old Testament here, I always remember that the story of 7 years of feast and 7 years of famine.
Yeah.
There was a lesson there in that story about saving up for the famine during the years of feast, and that's an important lesson. And again, just thinking out loud, going back to say what's happening in the southwest at the moment on octopus. It's very lucrative at the moment. But none of us know where this will go. Will the octopus bloom disappear after this year? Will it be around for 5 years? Will it be around for 10? Is it around forever? But if your glass half empty, and if you think that it's going to disappear sooner rather than later, what comes? How are we planning for the next phase? What about those shellfish operators who probably won't have much to catch after the octopus have gone for 4 or 5 years? So, as I say, my Calvinist roots take me back to my, as I say, 7 years of feast, 7 years of famine, and I always thought it's a good analogy.
Yeah. Changing it a minute. The dreaded word, but I class as the most overused word in the English language. Sorry, sustainability.
Oh yeah.
With sustainability and profitability are sometimes portrayed as competing priorities. Do you feel that they can work hand in hand?
And they have to work hand in hand. I look, it's a glib cliche but you can't really have economic sustainability without environmental sustainability, and economic sustainability is as important as any other form of sustainability in my view. So the two are codependent. So, look, I think going back to your point, you've got to be careful about killing the golden goose. And I think I think most businesses recognise that, particularly that you need a long term perspective on these things. And environmental sustainability, I think, is absolutely it is the bedrock of profitability in the end in the fishing industry, in my view.
I have to say, just as an observation, and don't try to read anything into it where I'm coming from. It's just an observation. You probably find it yourself, Colin. Obviously, people associate me with fishing, seafood, and over the years, friends they would say, "Oh, I bought fish, such and such, this species or that species." They'll tell me the species they bought. They'll tell me how good it was or what they felt about it, and what they dish that they cooked with it. Anytime anybody's telling me now they bought fish, they tell me what they paid for it.
Really? Is that right?
Yeah.
Interesting. But at the same time, I often think, people at the same time still go out to a restaurant, and if they go out to a restaurant, they'll often, I don't know, they'll pay. Sorry, I'm based in London, so maybe this is London prices, but they'll happily pay 25 quid for a steak. Well, maybe not happily, but they'll often end up having to pay 20 something quid for a steak, and probably more. But there's less of a moan about that, I always find, than if they're having to pay for fish. We've got a kind of a funny set of expectations in Britain sometimes, that we expect fish to be cheaper, whereas we forget that actually it is a really amazing premium quality product in in so many cases. And why should we why should we expect it to be dirt cheap? It's a fantastic premium healthy product. But you're right. Yeah, look, price is a huge issue, and it goes back to the point about very often people switch to cheaper protein sources when times are tough. But look, there's a great product. I enjoy eating it. So,
and yeah, the other thing that I feel a wee bit, possibly, I say, annoyed about at times, but or maybe no, let's not talk about annoyance. Interest, definitely interested.
sure.
You'll be talking to people, and do you ever find that people they'll make comparisons with when they're talking about price,
Yeah.
and just say they're talking about a certain species of fish. We could say any haddock in Scotland, cod,
Yeah.
and what do they compare that with? Else, you can go to the butchers and buy mince for something, or stew or that. And I say, well, wait a minute here. We're talking about really top end, high quality food here.
Exactly. And if it goes back to the point that I often think all sorts of people probably don't think twice in London, where I live, about paying, I don't know, 25, 30, 35 quid for a steak. And it's probably not a very big piece of meat at all. Yet they kind of turn their nose up at at fish being more than £2.50. That doesn't feel like we're treating like with like there.
Yeah. And do you see an importance in innovation in creating a more resilient seafood industry?
So, look, yes, when you see the kind of in the food service sector, or in the processing sector, I suppose, secondary processing, those businesses that are supplying the retailers, putting forward incredibly innovative products to attract more consumers to seafood, to attract more consumers to fish. So look, we see that all the time. But then, maybe going to the other end of the supply chain, innovation can mean all sorts of different things. Gear technology. There's incredible innovation going on in gear technology
Yeah.
around the UK. I am no expert in gear technology. I kind of roughly know what a dolly rope is, but I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert in it. But there's incredible innovation going on there that often I think the sector doesn't really get the credit for, in the way that I think it could do. So there's a huge innovation going on in the catching sector to lessen the environmental impact of fishing. And I sometimes think it's a shame that we're not always very good at telling that story collectively about the way that innovation is lessening the environmental impact of fishing, and of the way that innovation is bringing out a really quality product for consumers.
Colin, just say fishermen contributing to Seafish through the levy system that you mentioned earlier. What would you say to any who questioned whether they received sufficient value in return?
So I would say to them, phone us up, drop or send us an email, and let's talk it through. I would want that individual to help me understand where, if that fisherman thinks that Seafish is missing a trick, I want to understand that. I want them to tell me that, and I want to have that conversation with them so that I can understand how we can help them better. Because if we're missing a trick, I want to know about that. Personally, I'm not convinced that we are always missing a trick, but if we are, I want to know about it, and we will fix it. So, we used to say lift the phone. I'm not sure people do lift the phone these days, but lift the phone, tell us, send us an email if you think you're not getting what you're not getting anything back for your levy. Tell us, and we will come and talk to you. We will talk you through the services that we offer. We will talk you through all that we have to offer, and we will try and make sure that we are adapting what we offer to the needs of your business, whether it's catching sector, whether it's processing sector, whether it's anything else. So come and talk to us is what I'd say.
Brilliant. And how do you ensure that the Seafish yourselves remain connected to the realities of life at sea and on the quayside?
Yeah, look, that's always a challenge, I think, for any organisation. So we do that in a number of ways. We've got people who are out and about, who are embedded in communities around the coast, who live in different parts of the UK. From the tip of Cornwall to Ardnamurchan to Kent to County Down, etc., etc., etc. So we have people who are spread out all around the coast and all around the country who are hearing at first hand what's going on around the coast. Obviously, that in itself, that's not enough in itself, and then on top of that we have. I think I mentioned earlier, a whole range of what we would call sector panels, advisory committees, made up of representatives of industry who talk us through what's going on and what's going on in their sector, what's going on in their businesses. And then on top of that, I am very, very keen that Seafish staff, whether they're on the coast or anywhere else, are out and about talking to industry at all times. I always say that Seafish has to be seen to be believed, and I want Seafish staff to be out and about as much as possible in ports, in factories with our processors, on shellfish farms, on whatever else, keeping their ear to the ground and understanding the reality of what's going on in the sector. Because if we're not doing that, then we can't adapt our offer and our work to the realities of the world around us.
Indeed. And I know I was going to ask you, I know there's no such thing as a silver bullet, but where do you think Seafish can make the sort of greatest positive difference for fishing businesses?
So, look, I think, I'll go back to what we've set out in the annual plan this year. That there are, I suppose, at the most obvious level, a safer sector is always going to be a better sector. We do a huge amount of work on the safety front, and I think a safer sector is going to be a more attractive sector for younger people to join as well. Frankly, so that's certainly one area where I think we can help. Obviously, catching sector, you have to be able to sell the produce, and you have to have markets to sell it to. Either UK markets, international markets to sell it to. We do, it's core and central to our work is that kind of market development work and work around getting seafood in and out of the country efficiently, legally, and at minimal cost. So, I personally think there are a whole heap of areas where Seafish can add value. Again, I'm just mentioning gear technology. We do a lot of work on the gear technology front, and that's certainly something I'm very keen for us to expand and do more on, frankly. So, but I think I'd come back to the point that if a particular business or a particular boat or a particular skipper thinks that we're not adding value, I really want to hear about it. I want them to tell me so that we can make sure that we are listening to what they've said and adapting our offer as a result.
No, I like the way you keep connected and you see that's the importance in doing that. That's positive. I see that as positive.
Look, there's that awful phrase, the license to operate. It's a bit of a cliche these days, but Seafish's license to operate has to come from its understanding of the sector, its openness to the sector, and I mean, the whole of the supply chain, not solely the catching sector, but important though it is. Our license to operate has to come from having strong understanding of the sector and from listening and from being responsive and learning from what we hear around us. Without that, we have a license to operate.
When you say that, Colin, with the listening, it's reminding me of advice my father used to give me.
Oh, yeah.
He would say, you have 2 eyes, you have 2 ears, and 1 mouth. He says, use that order.
Well, exactly. And the ratio is like that for a good reason.
Absolutely.
No, I couldn't agree more. That's that. As I say, that ratio is an important lesson to for all of us to bear in mind.
Definitely. What would you like the UK seafood sector to look like in years to come?
Oh goodness! Look, what would I like it to look like? Look, I really want it to be. I want it to be successful. I want it to be. Look, I want it. The sector is complex. There's a variety there's a whole range of different parts to it. Those that are catching and who are exporting, I want them to be able to export their products, land their product legally, safely, and in a sustainable way, and be able to make good money from it as a result. I want the quality of that produce to be recognized globally. And for those who are perhaps more reliant on the on importing seafood, I want them to be able to have a business model which lends itself to the consumer wanting to buy their products. I want them to have businesses which can navigate the sometimes complex import regulations well. Look, basically, I want them to be economically and environmentally sustainable, I suppose, is maybe the shorter answer to it all. But economically and environmentally sustainable is what I want them to see, what I want them to be.
Yeah, good. And what would you like your legacy at Seafish to look like?
Gosh, my legacy. Gosh, I've only been in the job 6 months. I haven't got to the point of thinking about a legacy yet, Jim. Although Keir Starmer only lasted 2 years, so maybe anyway. Let's. So
you seem a forward-thinking guy. So
look. It's a cliche. All you want to do is try to help help businesses do a better job, help the fishing industry be more profitable, be more sustainable, be whether that's economically or environmentally sustainable. You want communities to thrive, and that's what any of us, I suppose, any of us have as our legacy is communities thriving.
Uh-huh. Yeah, good. And just say we were recording again 12 months' time, what achievements would you like to feel you're going to be reporting?
So, what would I say? 12 months' time. Well, look, I would want there to. I think a kind of a clearer understanding amongst our stakeholders of what Seafish does, of what its purpose is, or what its strategy is. That's something we have to keep chipping away at and reiterating. So, definitely in 12 months' time, I'd want a clearer. I would very much hope that our stakeholders have a clearer sense of all of that. Secondly, I'd really want that the industry sees us as their go-to partner for export promotion, for analysis of the seafood sector, for helping them navigate their way through the regulatory morass that they sometimes face. That they see us as a really strong provider of training, of safety initiatives, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, look, for me, I think it's the core is how we go about telling our story as an organisation, and I really want us to be telling our story better, telling it more in human terms, and telling it more cogently.
Yeah, yeah. And do you think there is something of a gap between what policymakers believe the industry's priorities are and what fishermen actually experience day to day?
Um, as an ex-policymaker, I think I feel the need to defend my ex-colleagues. Look, look, no one has a monopoly on wisdom. No one has, whether no matter what profession they're in. Um, and it's important that government, whether that's governments in Edinburgh, Belfast, Cardiff, or London, it's important that governments are as up to speed and as deeply embedded in their fishing communities as they can be. Otherwise, they will make less credible decisions. So, look, my experience personally in the fishing sector is that I think, and maybe I would say this, wouldn't I, because I work for government, but I actually think governments are engaged and are really, really close to the catching sector in a way that doesn't happen as much in many, many other sectors of the economy. Um, uh, I see people thinking back to my former DEFRA colleagues. I see really, really knowledgeable, capable folk there who are as passionate about a successful sector as every fisherman is. So, look, I feel a need to defend my former colleagues here. Of course, there's more that can be done to narrow that gap. Of course, there is always more that can be done, and Seafish is very happy to help narrow that gap as well. But yeah, look, I'm happy to defend the honour of my former colleagues on that one, Jim.
No, I wouldn't say the reason where I was coming from saying that, but I had one experience. A good friend of mine was landing in Scrabster, and he came up to me and he had a letter with variations and things that he had, policy maker,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
things that he had to get seen to on his fishing boat. And I'm not trying to be
Yeah,
critical
yeah,
and say everybody's like that, but he was holding the letter. He says to me, Jim, he says, reading that, I can tell that the person that wrote that has never been on a fishing boat in his their lives.
yeah. And look, I'm quite sure that happens, and I'm quite sure it happens too often. Um, Look, there's often all sorts of reasons why things like that happen, but look, I think the key is making sure that, and I get back to the point that Seafish staff and I think government staff as well. It's so important that they get out and about around ports and business and
Yeah.
processing companies around the UK. Nothing beats spending a day in a harbour talking to fishermen. Nothing beats being in a market at 5 a.m. seeing what's being landed. Nothing beats being in a well, I've got a beard, so beard net and hair net in a processing factory. Just understanding how it actually operates on the ground. That is worth its weight in gold, and is worth any number of hours kind of reading about the industry. So, I would only encourage any of my former colleagues in government to spend a lot of time doing that.
Good, good. And do you ever come across? I think it fascinated me. Never thought about it. Had no reason to before, but having spent time with my restaurant, and I was involved in some of the chefs' associations, federations, and that, and going around different places, establishments, and meeting people. I never realized it, but when as I got to know more chefs, I was quite amazed with how close chefs and fishermen are.
Is that
They
right?
talk they talk
Interesting.
the same. There's so many similarities in the way the. I don't know. I'm not coming up with magic plans and giving great long-winded reasons, but it really fascinated me
Good,
how.
good. Like, maybe it comes back to that point about passion, that chefs are incredibly passionate about the raw materials they're using, and fishermen are incredibly passionate about their job, and about the practice of fishing, and passion meets
Yeah,
passion.
yeah. No, I often think it would be good for both. Because let's face it, they both need each other. The chef needs the
Yeah,
fish.
completely,
The
completely.
fish, the chef needs the fish, but the fisherman needs the chef to buy it. So
Totally, totally. And the chef wants to know that the produce he or she's handling is the best possible quality and has been caught in the best possible way. And yeah, it's an interesting point. Yeah, I hadn't really thought of that.
yeah, what's the most impressive things you've seen since joining Seafish? Is there anything in particular that's wow, that impresses me?
You mean in the industry?
Just in general, just within Seafish or yes, the industry.
Uh, Look, I suppose one of the things I'm always really impressed by. I mentioned the kingfisher work that Seafisher does earlier. That kind of geospatial mapping work, which I'm no expert on, but gosh, when you see that mapping work that goes on to map out fishing activity across the UK, and the kind of the technical expertise that sits behind all of that, I must admit I always find that incredibly impressive. I'm certainly not an expert in it, but it impresses the likes of me when I see it. But and, and then also, as I say, just I love getting out and about and visiting businesses and all of that. But there are plenty of wow moments when you go to processing factories and you see the way in which they adapt their products for their consumers, and the way that they're incredibly innovative. Yeah, so there's all sorts of wow moments, I think, when you go and just get out and about and visit places. And probably the other
Okay.
wow moment was the amount of octopus that was being landed in Cornwall last week. But that was quite a wow moment as well.
That's an incredible story. That I've
Yeah.
had a I've had a podcast with Bryce Stewart
Oh
on
yeah,
on,
good.
on the podcast Bloom. My goodness, it's really interesting.
It's fascinating. on so many different levels, and in some ways incredibly positive, other ways, very worrisome.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, you know, what what will happen in 2 years' time, 5 years' time, and so on? There's a lot of worries there.
Is there anything you would like consumers to know about seafood? Is there anything in particular that you've picked up?
Look, I think the thing I'm always struck by, if you go to, I don't know, you go to Sainsbury's, you go to Tesco, wherever, you know, um, I live in Clapham in London, so I go to Sainsbury's in Clapham High Street, and there's so many products that are advertised on the basis of high in protein, etc., etc. And I think sometimes we miss a trick a little bit in pitching seafood as that kind of high in protein type of product. And I think so. I suppose what I mean in that is, what I would really love consumers to perhaps to accept and have a better understanding of just the protein intensity of all sorts of seafood. And so yeah, I think that's probably one area. It's just and also just seafood's gotten such a kind of romantic history behind it all, and a romantic provenance. And so many people want to understand where their food comes from. And I think I suppose in a general sense, whether it's seafood or whether it's any other food, I'm always very keen for to see consumers understanding where their food comes from, whether it's beef, whether it's milk, whether it's vegetables, whether it's seafood. I think it's so important that consumers should understand where their food comes from.
Good. And is there any one thing, to almost like folding up, is there any one thing you'd like fishermen to know about seafish?
Oh, well, look, I'd go back to the point that tell us if we're doing something wrong. Just tell us, and I want to know about it. If you think that you're not getting value out of seafish, tell us. But also, if you think we are doing a good job, tell us that as well. I'd quite like to hear both of those things. But and if an individual business or an individual fisherman doesn't know what we do, tell us, and we'll come and talk to them and talk them through our offer, listen to what they want from us, and see if we can match those two things up.
Wonderful. How can our listeners follow you online, Colin? Are you on a social media presence? Or?
I confess I'm on LinkedIn and so on, which isn't the most exciting social media thing in the world. But I confess I'm not a massive social media person, but LinkedIn is probably the main place. I must admit, I tend to use social media more as opportunities for me to learn about what's going on in the world, rather than self promotion. I must admit.
And the Seafish presence on.
Yeah, so I think Seafish itself is over all the socials. We've got an Instagram account now, so I'm sure you're on Instagram, Jim. But if you want to follow Seafish, we're on Instagram now. I think as of last week. But yeah, and we're over. I think less so on X. We're probably moving away a bit from X. But all the other socials, we're over all of that.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I'm going to hold up and thank you very much, and wish you success with your post. And you certainly come across as you mentioned yourself, a glass half full person.
Yeah, I think that's right. I am.
I think that's.
I think a kind of optimist, but a realist at the same time.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Colin.
No, and thank you for the opportunity, Jim. Very much appreciated.